I was born into what many would call a good family, but now I understand that word in a new way. My parents had a clear list of rules about what they believed was proper. Everything we said, wore, or did had to follow their strict rules for what they thought was decent behavior. My sister, Linda, was the perfect child for them. She understood how to follow their rules and joined in just right. She always said the right things, wore nice clothes, and even went out with the right boy from a good family. She helped plan church events and always agreed with what Mom and Dad said, making her the perfect daughter they always wanted. I, however, figured out the act pretty quickly. Our home was like a stage, with my parents as the stars. In public, they acted like great role models for everyone. Dad always wore his tie just right, and Mom chose her church clothes carefully. They always went to community events, gave to the right charities, and made sure everyone saw how generous they were. But right after the audience left, they took off their masks. Our living room turned into what I quietly named the gossip room. Mom's friends would come over for coffee, and that's when the fun started. "Did you see what the Hendersons wore at church?" Mom would say, stirring her coffee with a pretend frown. "And their daughter is running around in those shorts. They need to learn about modesty." Dad was not better either. He would laugh at comments about other people's jobs, cars, and houses, always acting like he cared. "Mark Cuban is really trying to look good with that new car. Everyone knows his business is having a hard time," he'd say with a sneaky tone. They judged my Aunt Elizabeth the most. She is Dad's sister. She was all the things they weren't, and I really liked her for that. Aunt Elizabeth was an actress and did really well in theater and musicals. She lived her life how she wanted. When she came over, it was like someone opened a window in our boring, stiff house, bringing in fresh air and light. She always gave nice gifts that showed she thought about what people really liked. Mom and Dad would take her gifts with nice smiles and say thank you, but once her car left, they shared what they really thought. "Can you believe she is still dating at her age?" Mom would say, using her fingers to make air quotes. "It's just living in sin, that's all. No husband and no kids. What kind of life is that for a woman?" Dad would join in as well, holding one of her gifts. With all that theater money, you'd think she could buy something better. But no, she uses it all for herself, they would say. They talked a lot about how much money she must be making, how she wore nice clothes, but gave them inexpensive gifts, and how she was being a bad role model by focusing on her job instead of starting a family. It seemed like they had a big list of things to say as soon as she was gone. I was 7 years old when something happened that changed how I looked at things. It was just another normal afternoon at our house. Mom was having her weekly tea with her friends. I was playing softly with my dolls in the corner of the living room where they believed I couldn't hear them. They began to talk about Aunt Elizabeth once more. "She's just a loose woman," Mom said in a quiet, whispery voice she used when saying the meanest things. Her friends nodded and made small, surprised noises, but they were clearly having fun with the gossip. I sat there, holding my doll, not moving at all. I kept thinking about those words. They were in my mind, and I wanted to understand what they really meant. I had heard Mom and her friends call Aunt Elizabeth many names before, but this one was different. The way they said it sounded really bad, but I didn't get why it stuck in my head for weeks, bothering me. I waited until Aunt Elizabeth came to visit again, and then I waited until we were alone in the kitchen. She was helping me get the cookie jar from the top shelf, just like she always does. "Aunt Elizabeth," I said, fiddling with my cookie, "what does it mean to be a loose woman?" "That's what Mom and her friends say about you when you're not around." The cookie jar almost slipped from her hands. She set it down carefully, but I noticed her hands shaking. Her face showed so many emotions at once: hurt, shock, and then something I'd never seen before, pure anger. "Rachel, honey," she said softly, trying to stay calm. You stay right here." She marched straight into the living room where my parents were sitting. I followed quietly and peeked from the doorway. "I've put up with a lot from you, too," she began, her voice trembling. "I've ignored your snide comments, your judgments, and all the criticism of how I live my life. But this, calling me names behind my back, how dare you?" Mom started to respond, but Aunt Elizabeth cut her off. "Don't even try to deny it. I know all the things you say when I'm not here. You're nothing but selfish hypocrites. You smile at me, accept my gifts, and then trash me the moment I leave. I'm done with it. Done with your gossip, your two-faced behavior, all of it." She stormed out of the house that day and never came back. The door slammed so hard that the family photos on the walls shook. Years went by, and my sister Linda got married right after high school to Daniel, the son of Mom and Dad's best friends. It was exactly the kind of proper, respectable marriage my parents adored. Then they turned their attention to me. Before my senior year even began, Mom made an announcement at dinner. "We found the perfect boy for you," she said proudly. "James Thompson. You remember the Thompsons, don't you? Such a respectable family." I looked at her and said, "But I want to go to college." I tried to keep my voice calm. "I've been looking into college programs." Dad laughed like it was a joke. "College for what? James is going to take over his father's business. He needs a supportive wife, not some career woman." They set up a meeting, of course. James was exactly what I expected, polite, boring, and completely wrong for me. But when I saw the look in my parents' eyes, I knew they wouldn't give up easily. So I smiled and agreed to date him while secretly applying for college scholarships. Graduation day started like a dream. I was top of my class, had secured a scholarship, and had my whole future ahead of me. My parents didn't know about the scholarship yet. After the ceremony, there was a party at James's house. Most of our class was there. The music was loud, and everyone was celebrating. For once, everything felt perfect, until it wasn't. I went upstairs to use the bathroom and accidentally opened the wrong door. There was James in bed with my friend Jessica. My graduation cap slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a thud, making them both look up. "Rachel." James scrambled to cover himself. "This isn't what it looks like." "I mean, save it," I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. "We're done." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. My phone started buzzing right away, calls from James, texts from Jessica, but I ignored them. I knew the real trouble would come when my parents found out. "What do you mean you broke up with James?" Mom shrieked the next morning. "He cheated on me," I said. "Over one little mistake," she snapped. Little mistake? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was in bed with my friend. "These things happen," Dad said, as if explaining something simple. "Men have needs. A good wife learns to look the other way." "You're telling me to just accept that he cheated on me?" I asked, stunned. "The Thompsons are close friends," Mom added. "Do you want to embarrass this family? You're airing our dirty laundry in public." That was it. Something inside me snapped. "Shame? You want to talk about shame?" I said, laughing bitterly. "All you care about is what people think. You sit in your perfect house judging everyone else, gossiping behind their backs. You're nothing but hypocrites." Mom stepped closer, her voice cold and sharp. "You'll apologize to James. You will marry him, or we will disown you." I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. "Actually, I won't," I said firmly. "I got a full scholarship to State University. I'm leaving for college in August." The silence was deafening. Mom's face went pale, and Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Get out," Dad roared. If you want to throw away everything we've planned for you, then get out of this house. You're no daughter of mine." I walked upstairs, grabbed the bag I had secretly packed just in case this happened, and walked out the front door. Behind me, I could hear Mom crying hysterically and Dad slamming things around. My hands were shaking as I dialed Aunt Elizabeth's number. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I'd always kept her number saved. She answered on the third ring. "Hello." "Aunt Elizabeth, it's Rachel," I said, my voice trembling. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "Rachel, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I told her everything. James cheating, my parents' reaction, the scholarship, and being kicked out. The words spilled out between sobs I hadn't realized I was holding back. "Where are you right now?" she asked. "Standing outside their house," I said quietly. "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." It was about an hour's drive, and true to her word, exactly 2 hours later, her red convertible pulled up to the curb. She jumped out and hugged me tightly, not caring that my tears were soaking her silk blouse. Aunt Elizabeth's house in the neighboring town was just like her, bright, welcoming, and full of personality. Theater posters lined the walls, and the cozy furniture made you want to sit and stay. It was everything our cold, lifeless family home wasn't. "Make yourself at home," she said, leading me to a guest room. "This is your space now for as long as you need it." That night, over mugs of hot chocolate topped with extra marshmallows, I told her the whole story in detail. She listened quietly, nodding every now and then, but never interrupting. When I finally finished, she smiled and said, "You know, you remind me of myself at your age, standing up to them, choosing your own path." "I'm proud of you, Rachel." "Really proud of me?" I asked hesitantly. "You don't think it's selfish?" She laughed gently. "Rachel, living your life by someone else's rules isn't selfless. It's being a puppet. You need to write your own story." The weeks before college started turned out to be some of the best of my life. Aunt Elizabeth helped me set up a laptop and taught me how to find freelance writing jobs online. "Everyone needs content these days," she said with a grin. "Might as well make some money while you're waiting for school to start." I spent my days writing articles about everything from pet care to travel tips. Evenings were for watching old musicals or reading scripts together. She'd tell me stories from her theater days, and for the first time I felt like I could truly be myself. When August came, Aunt Elizabeth drove me to college. She helped me carry my boxes to the dorm, arranged my desk just right, and even made my bed with new sheets she had bought for me. Before leaving, she hugged me and said, "This is your adventure. Make it count." I dove into my business management classes, determined to make her proud. We talked almost every day. She wanted to know all about my classes, roommates, and life on campus. My parents and Linda, though, radio silence. Aunt Elizabeth would sometimes pass along updates she'd heard. "Your sister had another baby," she mentioned during one of our weekly calls. "Her third, they named him Daniel Jr." I just shook my head and changed the subject to my upcoming midterms. Linda had chosen her path, just as I'd chosen mine. Sometimes I wondered if she was truly happy being the perfect daughter, wife, and mother, or if she ever dreamed of something more. After graduation, I accepted a management position in Aunt Elizabeth's city. It felt natural. I couldn't imagine being far from her. The job was great. My career was off to a strong start. And best of all, I got to spend almost every weekend with Aunt Elizabeth. Friday brunches became our tradition. She'd tell me about her latest theater projects. She was directing community plays now, passing on her love of the stage to a new generation. Sometimes we'd spend whole weekends binge watching old movies or attempting fancy recipes from cooking shows. Then came the news. One Friday morning, she sat across from me, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug. "Stage 4, she said softly. "They say I have a few months, maybe less." I moved in with her that same day. Between work and taking care of her, the days blended together. We made the most of every moment. She insisted on teaching me her secret recipes, shared stories from her younger days, and made me promise to keep living boldly. She passed away quietly on a Saturday morning, holding my hand. The theater community turned out in full force for her funeral. Actors, directors, and students from her workshops. The church was packed with people whose lives she had touched. But the 3 empty seats in the front row stood out. My parents and sister hadn't come, even though I had sent them all the details. A week after the funeral, the notary called me to his office. "Your aunt was very clear about her wishes," he said, sliding some documents across the desk. "The house, her land back in your hometown, and her savings, about $800,000, all of it goes to you." I sat there in shock, tears streaming down my face. It was too much. All I wanted was Aunt Elizabeth back. That weekend, I started sorting through her things in her home office. I found a bundle of letters tucked away in a drawer, all addressed to my father. None of them had been sent. With trembling hands, I opened the most recent one. "Dear Thomas, I know we haven't spoken in years. The doctors say I don't have much time left, and I keep thinking about family and reconciliation. Remember when we were kids, and you used to protect me from the neighborhood bullies? I miss my big brother. I know we've chosen different paths and lived different lives. Maybe we've both been too stubborn. But life is too short for pride, isn't it? I hope someday you'll understand that I loved you all, even when we disagreed, even when it hurt. Your sister, Elizabeth." The letter was dated just 3 weeks before she passed. She never sent it. She never got the chance to make that final attempt at peace. I carefully folded the letters and placed them back in the drawer. My dad hadn't even come to say goodbye to his own sister. He had chosen his pride over family one last time. Life keeps moving forward, ready or not. 3 years after Aunt Elizabeth passed away, I was still living in her house, my house now, and throwing myself into work. The promotion to senior manager came with a corner office and a salary that would have blown my younger self's mind. Then one day my phone rang. Mom's number flashed on the screen. It was the first time I'd seen it in years. My hand hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. "Rachel," Mom's voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "We need to see you. Can you come?" That weekend, I drove back to my childhood home. The sight of it stopped me in my tracks. The once perfect house was now falling apart, peeling paint, sagging gutters, and a lawn overrun with weeds. This wasn't the showcase home I remembered. Inside was even worse. The furniture was worn, the carpets threadbare, and my family looked just as tired. Mom was gray and exhausted. Dad sat slumped with defeat written all over him. Linda was curled up on the couch, her 2 kids clinging to her. Her eye was bruised, poorly covered with makeup. Daniel turned violent, Linda whispered, avoiding my eyes. I had nowhere else to go. The irony hit hard. Daniel, the son of Mom and Dad's perfect friends, the respectable match they'd chosen for Linda, had shown his true colors. We were wrong. "Rachel," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "About everything. About forcing you to be with James. About college. About you." Dad nodded, though it seemed painful for him to admit. "We shouldn't have tried to push either of you into those marriages. Look where all our focus on reputation got us." They explained how Dad's business had failed and how their so-called friends had abandoned them when things got tough. They couldn't even afford to fix their leaking roof. I pulled out my checkbook and wrote them a check for $20,000 for repairs. I said simply, no strings attached. After that, I started visiting regularly. I always brought something, groceries, clothes for the kids, or new appliances when theirs broke down. My parents seemed grateful. Maybe it was genuine. I tried not to overthink it. One night, as I sat looking at Aunt Elizabeth's photo on my mantel, I made a decision. The land she'd left me in my hometown was just sitting there, unused. The next day, I called an architect. I need a house, I said. I told the architect something big enough for a multi-generational family. 3 bedrooms minimum, plenty of play space for kids, and a proper kitchen for family meals. The plans she drew were perfect. A modern home with everything my family could need. I hired the construction crew that same week and made them promise to keep it a secret. Every time I visited my parents, I noticed their old house falling apart more and more. I'd smile to myself, knowing what was being built just across town. As the new house took shape over the months, I started noticing something else, a pattern. I should have seen it sooner. What began as genuine gratitude for my parents slowly turned into expectation and then outright entitlement. At first, the shift was subtle. Instead of saying thank you for whatever I brought, they'd make comments like, "Oh, we were hoping for the other brand," or "We really needed something else instead." Then came the direct requests. Mom started calling with shopping lists, not even pretending to ask anymore. "We need a new washing machine. The one at Sears is on sale. Can you pick it up this weekend?" Dad joined in too. "Your sister's kids need new school clothes. Make sure they're good quality, not the cheap stuff from the discount store." The requests got bigger and more frequent. A new TV because the old one wasn't smart enough. A full set of patio furniture because, what will people think of our backyard? Kitchen renovations because the counters were embarrassingly outdated. Then came the call about their 40th wedding anniversary. They were planning a big celebration at Loom, the fanciest restaurant in town. All their old friends, the ones who had supposedly abandoned them, were invited, and back in the picture. I thought it would be the perfect time to surprise them with the new house. The construction was finished, the interior was decorated, and everything was ready for them to move in. But a week before the party, Mom called. "Rachel," she said, skipping any greeting, "your father and I have been talking. For our anniversary, we need a new car. It's $7,000. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Excuse me." "We can't keep driving that old Toyota," she said matter-of-factly. "What will people think? You're doing so well now, surely you can afford it." "Mom," I said, stunned. "I already have a gift plan for you and Dad," I said, trying to stay calm. "What could possibly be more important than this?" Mom's voice turned sharp. "We're your parents. We sacrificed everything for you. The least you can do is make sure we have a decent car." Loom Zone was exactly the kind of place my parents loved. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and perfect for showing off to their social circle. I walked in carrying the house documents in a silver gift envelope, my heart racing despite the tension from Mom's recent demand. The celebration was already in full swing. I spotted them right away, Mom in a new dress, probably bought with my money, and Dad smiling proudly at their gathered friends. Linda sat quietly with her kids. The old crowd was there too, the same people who had supposedly abandoned my parents during their hard times. Mom saw me first. Instead of her usual fake smile, her face hardened. She leaned over and whispered something to Dad, who turned to look at me with the same cold expression. "Well, well," Mom said loudly, her voice carrying across the restaurant. "Look who decided to show up." I froze halfway to their table, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me. "Mom," I started. "Don't mom me," she snapped, standing up. "How dare you come here after refusing to help your own parents? After everything we sacrificed for you?" Dad joined in, his face red with anger. "We only asked for one simple thing to make your mother happy on our anniversary. But no, you're too selfish, too busy counting your money to care about your family." I stood there stunned as the room started to spin slightly. "Is this how you raised your daughter?" one of their friends asked, clearly enjoying the drama. "To disrespect her parents like this." "She's no daughter of mine," Mom declared loudly. "A real daughter would have bought her parents the car they needed. Instead, she shows up here empty-handed to ruin our celebration." Empty-handed? I finally found my voice, my hands shaking as I pulled out the envelope. "You want to know why I didn't buy you that car?" "We don't want to hear your excuses," Mom snapped. "Just leave. You're embarrassing us in front of our friends." I looked around the room. Their smug friends stared, enjoying the show. My sister avoided my eyes, her head down. My parents looked more concerned about their image than anything else. In that moment, I saw Aunt Elizabeth standing in our living room, all those years ago, facing the same judgment, the same cruelty. "I spent the last year building you a house," I said, my voice steady and clear. "A beautiful 4-bedroom home on Aunt Elizabeth's land. Space for everyone. You, Dad, Linda, and the kids. I was going to surprise you today." The color drained from their faces. Mom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "But now I see Aunt Elizabeth was right about you both. You haven't changed at all. You're still the same selfish, image-obsessed hypocrites who care more about impressing your friends than being decent people." I held up the envelope with the house documents and slowly tore it in half. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "The house is mine now, and so is my life. I'm done trying to buy your love." "Rachel," Dad started, but I cut him off. "No. I watched you drive Aunt Elizabeth away with your cruelty. I watched you force me and Linda into loveless marriages because you cared more about appearances than our happiness. And now I've watched you try to humiliate me in public because I wouldn't buy you an expensive car. I'm done watching." I dropped the torn envelope on the table. "Happy anniversary. I hope your reputation keeps you warm at night." With my head held high, I walked out, ignoring their calls behind me. My phone started ringing before I even reached my car. Then the texts started, Mom, Dad, Linda, even their friends, all suddenly realizing what they had lost. I blocked them all. I never saw my parents again. Occasionally, I'd hear things through the grapevine about how they lost their house, how Linda struggled to raise her kids alone, how their friends abandoned them again when the money ran out. But those weren't my stories anymore.